Get more confidence. Get that promotion. Get moving up the corporate ladder. Get a better gig with an MBA from Mays Business School at Texas A&M University. Whether you're starting out or stepping up, now you can take your career to a whole new level with a full-time MBA in College Station and convenient weekend options at Houston City Center. Texas A&M has a program to suit your schedule. Visit mba.tamu.edu. And Giga Maggie.
Howdy, welcome to Mays MasterCast. I'm Shannon Deere, the Assistant Dean of Graduate Programs, here with your majestic host, Ben Wiggins. He picked that adjective, by the way.
Oh, God. I was looking at a thesaurus, listeners. Don't let Shannon, I'm not going to let Shannon impugn my name here. Yeah. We also found coruscating. I'm here with your coruscating host, Ben Wiggins.
I don't know what that means, and it sounds a little gross, but...
It is not gross. It just means like shining or flashing.
Sparkly.
Yeah, sparkly. Yeah.
Are you a Twilight vampire?
I'm not a Twilight vampire. I would if I had to be a vampire, I would want to be a Blade vampire, but I'm not really cool enough to be a Blade vampire. So that's just that'll always be a dream.
I think you could pull off the Blade vampire. I'm lying.
Oh yeah?
No, I don't think you could. But
hang me out to dry.
Have you seen What We Do in the Shadows? Those vampires?
I have not seen What We Do in the Shadows. I am familiar with Taika's work and am very impressed with it, but
he's incredible.
What We Do in the Shadows. And
What We Do in the Shadows is super weird and still funny. It's very, very weird and quirky, but fun.
Quirky, like emo quirky? What kind of quirky?
I mean, a little emo quirky, but more like if you mixed emo quirky with, do you remember the SNL character Stuart that was like in the bathtub? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, Stuart.
Like the Californian Stuart?
In the bathtub doing drawings. Well, I mean, that would work too. That was not what I meant. It was more like whiny, but.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. The California ones would work too. And then mix that.
Stuart, you have cancer. Are you serious?
Yeah. Mix that with emo. You're 99% of the way there with What We Do in the Shadows.
Right. Fair enough.
Well, today on the show, we have Leasa Neaves. She is the Director of Diversity and People Programs for Dell Technologies. Leasa is an accomplished marketing professional who has a passion for developing and mentoring employees through the growth of their career. She has held many different roles in Dell across their sales and marketing function over her 22-plus year career. She has extensive experience in many different areas within Dell: strategy, marketing, sales, partner management, and she currently runs the Women in Action group within Dell that she has led since 2011. She talks a lot about that on the show and what she's doing for women in work through Dell and then outside of Dell as well. We appreciate Leasa and enjoyed having her on the show. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Yes, let's get into it.
We welcome Leasa Neaves to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
What is your favorite superpower?
You know, this is like a topic of hot debate in my house. I don't know if that's true with the other folks that you talk to. And I didn't choose any of the normal superpowers. I chose two. One is for fun, and one is for the greater good.
For realsies.
So the for fun one is I scuba dive, and I love being underwater and being able to breathe, but I hate the apparatus. So my for fun superpower would be if I could swim underwater with no apparatus. No, I think I want to have a companion, like maybe my husband can have the same superpower. Otherwise, it'd get kind of boring down there. But that would be my for fun one.
Okay.
And my for greater good would be to, like, this is going to sound so cheesy, to solve complex problems in a way that people actually accept and isn't divisive. Maybe that has a lot to do with the things that are happening in the world right now.
Sure. So what would that look like in practice? How would you implement that?
So I think you'd have to have the ability to just, like, I don't know, maybe be God. I don't know.
Well, that would always help.
I don't know. Yeah. But step back and really understand all of the dynamics of whatever that situation is, and really try to be able to create a solution that drives coalition and, agreement. I didn't say it was easy. I said it was a superpower, right?
Yeah, no. Well, the good news is I think that to some degree or another, that superpower for the uplifting coda to this whole thing, I think that superpower is in each of us to some degree. And here's what I mean. I think if you approach a problem, whether it's the racial issues we've been dealing with, whatever your stance is on the Trump presidency, whatever issue you might be talking about, if you approach it from a standpoint of asking questions and wanting to be educated, I think when people see that you're trying to learn as well, they become more willing to learn from you. And I think that everybody that muscle, if you will, is kind of nascent in the American population because for the most part, we haven't really had to do this kind of thing before. If you wanted to live in an echo chamber previously, you kind of could. And now with social media, we just can't really do that anymore. I mean, if you're that determined, you can just unfollow everyone who disagrees with you, but that's a lot of unfollowing.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah. And so we're all kind of smashed in next to each other. And I think that has created a lot of friction and social chaos. But in the long term, I think it's going to be a good thing.
I do too, actually. I think, we both in my personal life and my professional life, and with my children, with my friends, we've been having a lot of hard conversations about race, about COVID-19, about kids going back to school or not going back to school, or what the right or wrong of that is.
Yeah.
And I think, to your point, there are questions or conversations we would not have had before because we didn't have to. And now we have no choice. We have really hard problems that we have to solve. And the only way that we can solve them is by building the muscle that you're talking about and really creating the ability to talk and relate and understand and see other people as human and treat them accordingly in all of these controversial areas.
Yes. And as much as we all complain about Mark Zuckerberg or whoever the tech giant,
du jour.
Persona non grata du jour. Forgive the mixed metaphor there, is whoever that person is, whoever we're trashing this week, those social media services that we spend a lot of our time complaining about are, I think, the biggest thing that has brought us into contact with this truth, that we know people very well who are dealing with these issues in a much more personal way than we might be. And that's, our listeners have heard me discuss this on the air before, but that's what brought me around on gay marriage.
Yeah.
This was back in the day. But that, I think that kind of thing really helps us. It makes all of us more worldly. So
it does. Humanization helps us for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. Where did you grow up?
I grew up outside of Washington, D.C., in Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
Me and all the other military and government brats.
Yeah. How many in your family?
I just have one sister who, by the way, has a superpower. She's a super mom. Yes, she's one of the best moms I know. She's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
With her two daughters. So,
what do you think makes her so good? What's her hack? What's the one thing that sets her apart?
She is 100% completely focused on them.
Okay.
Yeah. And, I think that a lot of parents, we're all on our phones or we're talking to our friends or drinking a glass of Chardonnay or working or whatever. We all have a lot of priorities. Her priority is them. And I'm not saying that's the only way to be a super mom. I'm just saying that's her superpower. She's super focused on them and making sure that she's always the best mom she can be for them.
Did she ever talk to you about the darker side of that?
No. No, because I think she thinks, oh, my sister's over here in crazy working mom land. I'm just going to pretend it's all rainbows and butterflies over here.
Right.
100% focus on my kids' land.
Right. What did your parents do? You said military brats. How did that impact you?
Yeah, my parents were actually both FBI agents.
Oh.
Yeah. So both my mom and my dad, which is pretty cool. And I think, in Northern Virginia, where I grew up, having a dad who was an FBI agent was no big deal. I mean, the neighbor was CIA or military or whatever. But having a mom who was an FBI agent was a really big deal. And I, like, nobody else had that, and I think it influenced me in a lot of ways. So first of all, to have a dad who in 1979 had the foresight to be like, my wife is smart. My wife can have a career. My wife should go be an FBI agent, because he's the one who encouraged her. The FBI went on this recruiting gig in like the late 70s, said, we need more women. I don't think it was along the lines of what we try to do today around diversity. It was just, hey, we don't have any women, so let's go recruit some women. And so my dad was like, hey, you'd be a great FBI agent. You're smart, you're well-educated, you're totally underemployed. So he pushed my mom forward into a much better career. And then my mom, became an FBI agent. Again, nobody else had FBI mom. And she lived in a world of all men and hardly any women. And women at the time were really each other's rivals and enemies, not each other's allies and advocates. And so, when I think about the work I do today around helping women in technology, also a male-dominated field, a lot of that started with my mom and seeing her and the struggles she went through and the way that she navigated those things and the way that she actually she and other women interacted with each other, because in my mind that was not a sustainable or helpful way to really navigate the career environment. In fact, I'm not sure I thought that in 1979, but I surely knew that in 2020.
Silence of the Lambs, fair or unfair treatment of women's place in federal law enforcement in the 80s and early 90s?
I think I was too grossed out by that movie to really have a point of view on that.
Okay, fair enough. Let's move on. What was your greatest challenge as a child?
I don't think I was a very nice kid. I was like I was like the mean kid. Like,
why?
I don't know. I think about like this boy I beat up when I was in like the 5th grade. Like, what the heck? Yeah.
Why? What made you do that?
Because I could. I don't know. I wasn't a nice kid. I was like, people who know me now would never believe it, but I wasn't a nice kid. Like, I knew I had a dominant social position, and I could, and so I just took advantage of it. Thank God, somewhere along the way that changed.
Okay. So you were strong, well liked. You dominant social position. I assume you're
popular kids, as if there are popular kids in elementary school.
Okay, so you're an elementary school mean girl, is what you're saying.
I was.
Okay. What was your first job?
My first job was in a donut shop. Also in Northern Virginia, there was a little local donut chain called PMEK's. And like donuts, like that's a morning thing, right? And so my job was I worked 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. I was only 15 at the time. My dad had to get up, take me halfway across Northern Virginia to the donut shop, where I stood there and served donuts for a number of hours. Yeah, it was a interesting job.
6 a.m. to 2 p.m. So you were only working weekends?
Yeah, only working weekends. Yeah.
Okay.
That was enough.
Yeah, for 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. as a 15-year-old. Yeah.
And you come working in a donut shop, like everybody loves donuts, but like when you work in the donut shop, you come home, you smell like donuts. Your shoes are caked in sugar. Your hair is caked in sugar. Like, we baked the donuts in the donut shop. It wasn't just like a storefront. And so like, I can't eat donuts still. I can't stand the smell of them.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I know.
Give us 60 seconds on your road to Maze.
Sure. So, gosh, I think about 6 or 7 years into my career at Dell, like I had been in sales for quite a while, and then I switched to marketing, and I've always kind of gone back and forth between the two.
Yeah.
But marketing is a much more intellectual function, I would call it, at least at Dell, than sales. And I had switched to marketing, and I had a boss who sat me down in my performance review one day, and she's like, Leasa, you're never going to make it in marketing unless you get an MBA. You don't have what it takes. I was like, okay, well, that's pretty brutal. It wasn't like she said them in a nice way, like, hey, you could work on a couple things. It was really like, in your face, you don't have what it takes to make it in marketing. Go get an MBA or you can't compete. And I was like, wow.
Huh.
Yeah, it was rough. So I went and I started researching MBA programs. And my stepdad went to Prairie View A&M. My father-in-law got his graduate degree at A&M. My husband actually grew up in Snook, Texas. And so, when I started researching programs, found out about the Executive MBA program at A&M, I was like, this is the one for me. And I was right. It was a transformational experience. So I really loved it. My daughter was 2 at the time. I went back and forth to Houston every weekend, and she stayed with my mom while I went to school.
Forgive me. I want to go back to the conversation that led to this.
Yeah.
You don't have what it takes conversation.
Yeah.
Where was it that you were coming up short? Did she elaborate on that at all?
A lot of it was strategic thinking.
Okay.
Which, back to the comment about sales being, so I've always thought of sales as more like practical, like we need to meet customers where they are and be practical about meeting their needs and building those relationships. Whereas marketing, is much more intellectual, right? We've got to think bigger picture and be strategic about how are we going to reach a broader base of customers and, bring them into the marketing funnel. And I just didn't have that knowledge or experience. And quite frankly, even though the MBA from Texas A&M wasn't focused on marketing, it gave me the much broader picture of business and understanding how things in business worked with the lens of having, 7 or 8 years of work experience at that time as compared to when I got my undergrad degree. And the people in my class, I was one of the youngest people in my class in the Executive MBA program. They were all vice presidents and senior vice presidents and, executive directors and titles way higher than mine. And listening to them and hearing how they thought about business was, again, transformational to my thinking and really helped me switch on those skills about strategy and long-term thinking and bigger picture that have really helped me throughout my career.
How have your sales and marketing backgrounds helped you succeed in your current position? What's helped you in ways you wouldn't have expected?
Yeah, so the job I have now is really a departure from both my sales and marketing background, but because what I do is I build development programs for women specifically in Dell, and also I run our women's ERG, which is the largest ERG we have in Dell Technologies. And so, like intuitively, I don't know that there's a connection, but the reality is they're so very connected because what I have to do every day is both sell and market, both the case for diversity. Why should we support women in the workplace? How do we gain allies for women in the workplace? How do I get women more involved in advocating for themselves? Since I took over the leadership of the ERG, we've grown by almost 2,000 members. And, I think that really ties directly to the ability to sales and market. We've built communications plans. We have built engagement strategies. When I say we, I mean, I'm the only person who actually has this job. Everybody else who is on my team is volunteers, people I've gone out and used my sales skills to recruit, to come in and to help in this effort. And I just don't think that I could succeed in what I'm doing. I mean, I could have a much stronger L&E background and maybe be, have more pedagogical background where I know a little more about adult learning and things like that. But I've been able to source other people to do that. Whereas really my job is to be the face of the ERG and the face of women's development and go out and recruit people and market to people and get them involved and engaged. And I think we're on a really good trajectory. That's good growth for the ERG. And the positive thing is it's not just women who are joining our Women in Action ERG. We're also seeing men join our Women in Action ERG, which is equally important because we need men as allies, especially in tech, where just like the FBI, there are far more men than there are women.
How do you get more women involved in advocating for themselves? Is it just sort of, is everything kind of just incremental, or has there been one arena or one venue where you feel like this is kind of the frontier right now? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say there's so many things that are happening that have attributed to kind of the breakthroughs that we're making. So, like societally, the Me Too movement, right? Just the way that society perceives women and advocates for women and says, no, this is not okay for women, has changed substantially in the wake of the Me Too movement. That's external. Books like Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, right? There are many, many more. Just a conversation in society around supporting, enabling women, professional women, and all women actually has accelerated dramatically. So that's kind of external. Inside Dell Technologies, we're really fortunate that our founder, Michael Dell, is a huge advocate for all diversity. He's equally involved in the Standing Strong movement inside Dell to support Black employees, as he is involved in Women in Action to support women in our company. He hired a leader named Brian Reeves, who is our first Chief Diversity Officer. And Brian actually has implemented there's these series of goals called Moonshot goals for Dell. And in the Moonshot goals, the expectation is that 50% of the women, or 50% of the employees at Dell will identify as female globally by 2030, and 40% of the leaders at Dell will identify as female by 2030. And so the goals are big. They're out there. They're part of our 2030 Progress Made Real campaign, and leaders are measured upon those goals. And so they can't just hide, right? You can't just brush aside the fact that, oh gosh, we don't have enough women. And by the way, there are goals for also goals for Black and Latino employees as well. And the goals are not intended to be quotas. They're intended to be motivation and to help us understand, help us look forward to numbers that we can actually achieve. And Dell's just a super numbers oriented company. If you give us a number, everybody's going to go chase it. That's just part of the culture of the company.
Yeah.
But that kind of leadership has led to other leaders buying in, which has led to me having this job full time. I'm the only one, like I said. And it gives me a platform to go out and have these conversations. But it's just the beginning, right? If I am not convincing, or if I can't get other women or other men or whatever to lean in and be involved, then that leadership falls apart along the way.
Right. What is the most energizing aspect of your current role? What is the part of your job that you get the most excited about?
My favorite thing is I get these emails all the time. I mean, not all the time. If it was all the time, it wouldn't be that exciting. But I get an email from a random woman who maybe I met somewhere, or, she heard me speaking on some internal event at Dell, and she's like, Leasa, thank you. What I heard, or, what you and Women in Action delivered to me is game changing for me. We did a session. I don't know if you're familiar with the Imposter Syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of women, and actually a lot of men too, really imposter syndrome is really a big challenge internally for folks. And we did this session a couple months ago. We brought in an outside speaker who specializes in imposter syndrome, and she did a 45-minute seminar on imposter syndrome. And at the end of that session, again, I'm the face. People know me at Dell for Women in Action, right? I got 5 emails from different women saying, gosh, that speaker spoke to my soul. Gosh, I didn't know that that other people felt the same way I do. And to be able to know that the things that we're doing make a difference for those women, because now they know they're not alone. They have some strategies to tackle imposter syndrome, right? They can talk about it. They have words for it. Those things make a difference to me every day and get me super energized. And that's just an example, but it happens enough that it really kind of keeps me going. It's pretty cool.
Here's something interesting about imposter syndrome. Have you read Blink by Malcolm Gladwell?
A long time ago, actually. Yeah.
Okay, so he talks about how character is granular and it's not universal. I think imposter syndrome is that way as well. What I mean is that you might have someone who's extremely confident in many areas of their life, and I can say this with confidence because this is me.
Yeah.
But in a couple of areas, they feel significant imposter syndrome. Do you see that showing up even within your workplace and people dealing with imposter syndrome in a very specific area of the work that they're doing?
Yeah. So this is a common thing for women. This is not a Dell thing by any means, but and you may have heard this before, right? But like when women are applying for jobs, they go and they look at the job description, and the job description says you need to have this qualification, this qualification, this qualification, this qualification, and they start reading, and they think they get down to like the third or fourth one, they're like, oh, I don't have that, I don't have that, I don't have that, and then they put it aside, right? Men will look at the same job description, and they may have one of the 10 qualifications, and they think, well, I can learn all of this, I'm going to apply for the job. And it's a very real manifestation of imposter syndrome, right? Women think, I don't have that, I'm not good enough. If I go into and apply for that job, God forbid I get the job, then they find out I'm an imposter, I can't actually do all of these things, so I'd rather just not apply. And we see it every day. And I think a lot of companies see this. And there's a lot of work that's being done to try to create job descriptions that are more, more realistic. And that's actually not just a women thing, right? It could be for, people who come from different educational backgrounds or, a lot of different factors, but trying to create job descriptions and just application processes in general that are, more open, I guess, more inviting to candidates.
Yes. I agree with what you're saying. And I think it goes back to, and this is a difficult one to address because early education is not thought of as being sexist, but it is. And I think many of our primary educators and our kindergarten teachers and so forth, preschool teachers, have the best of intentions and would be mortified to hear that. But it's not a them thing necessarily. It's more a societal thing where we think boys are supposed to be troublemakers. We think of boys as troublemakers. And if you have a question, raise your hand. And if you think something is not right, you should comment on that. Like, boys are taught to just kind of go for it. And girls are, I think, less so now. They're not told not to go for it necessarily, although sometimes that too, but they are not encouraged to sort of just speak your mind and find things out and go on, go on your quest, your intellectual learning quest. And girls are thought of as sugar and spice and everything nice. Less so now, but there are still echoes of that. And I think that limits the way that young girls think about things. And then that echoes into what you're talking about.
Yeah, I do too.
So now, next question, what do we do about that? Because maybe this problem could be more effectively addressed dealing with 5-year-olds than 25-year-olds or 45-year-olds. Yeah. Any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, I do think. So I think there's. I'm not a person who thinks that prevent kids from playing with the toys they want to play with. Some people say, don't let your daughter play with dolls. Well, let them choose. If they want to choose to play with dolls or they want to choose to play with trucks, let them make those choices, right?
I'm with you. Yep.
But I do think that we have to, to your point, educate girls in different ways. My daughter is now going to be a senior in high school this year, but when she was in elementary school, she was in the Gifted Talented program here at our local elementary school. Yeah. And it made me so, I was so proud of her, but there were hardly any girls in the program. And I guarantee you that there are just as many smart girls at that elementary school as there are smart boys, right?
Yeah, of course.
The difference was their parents weren't pushing the girls in the same way as they were pushing the boys to get into the Gifted Talented program. So where were the girls? Not there. And so, I think it is incumbent upon us as parents to really, give our daughters the mindset and the tools that they need to get there. My daughter is so sick and tired of me saying this to her, but I will not stop. And that is always ask for what you want. Just ask. The worst thing that can happen is someone can tell you no. But if you don't ask, you will never get the yes. And that one is one for me in particular as a woman that I don't think I learned that till a lot later. And I see it in a lot of women along the way. And I just think if, as parents, as teachers, right, if we can just kind of break some of those expectations of girls and how they behave, like sugar and spice and everything nice, then they will learn, and they will be more, not only more confident, but more capable of taking a seat at the table, because they will have built the skills along the way. I watch, I have one daughter and I have 3 boys, and I watch how they interact with each other, how they play with each other, just the things they do. And I, they do have certain things that they prefer to do, in certain ways that they prefer to behave. But the question is always, where did that come from? Is it really part of them, or is it something we've created? And so I just think, as parents, moms or dads, it's incumbent upon us to try to teach our daughters to be a little more, to give them that confidence at a younger age, and help them break those stereotypes.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think it's always both. It's something that's in them innately, and it's something that we gave them. It's always some combination of the two. So let me push back on this just a little bit, not in the sense of not empowering our daughters, because obviously I think that's very important. But as parents, I think one of the evolutions going on in parenthood right now is not pushing our kids as hard, period. Kids are so scheduled now. And I have no idea how you handle that dynamic in your house. I'm sure you've given a lot of thought to it. But the tension that we have to deal with is encouraging our daughters, especially, to ask for what they want, like you said, and to go for what they want. But I think for all of our kids, daughters and sons, we have to very closely consider what is my encouraging them to do whatever thing it may be. What effect does this have on their self-concept? And do they know that they are enough if they're not driving hard in the classroom? And I think kids should be taught to work at a certain level, that if they have their name on something, that means something. But I think there's a difference. And I think some kids are innately driven to, regardless of gender, are innately driven for more competition, perhaps.
Totally.
So then how do we balance? Because those two things pull against each other.
Yeah.
How do we address that?
Yeah. It's a good question, and honestly one that we struggle with a lot in our house. Again, having 4 kids, and they are wired really, really differently. Yeah. And my daughter is the most competitive, which makes me wonder if maybe
Okay.
Maybe we influenced her that way,
Sure.
But what we really try to do is we try to treat them all fairly, but we never tell them that we're treating them equally, because they're not all the same, right? To me, equal implies that everybody gets a cookie, right? That's equal, right? But maybe Jackson's allergic to the cookie, so he shouldn't get a cookie. He should get an ice cream cone, and that doesn't mean that Tyler doesn't get an ice cream cone, but Tyler's not allergic to the cookie. So we try to treat them all fairly, and we try to appreciate them for who they are. And to me, sometimes, to your point about overscheduling, it means things get complicated because nobody around here does the same stuff. We've got one who loves coding. We've got one who loves golf. We've got one who loves football. We've got one who loves dance. The one who loves coding, if he never had to do another extracurricular activity in his life, he would be completely happy. And he feels pressure from his friends he's 13 and he's 6 feet tall. He feels pressure from his friends to be involved in sports, and he could not care less. Yeah. And so, we try really hard to just appreciate them for who they are, and let that happen, while also encouraging them to always do their best. Not doing their best is never okay. They always have to do their best, but we understand that the best means different for different kids, and they have different skills, and they have different abilities, and they have different things like their competitiveness and their those kind of natural personality characteristics. So I wish we had the perfect solution. We'll see. We can talk in about 20 years, and we can talk about how our kids grew up.
Sounds good to me. Talk a little bit about gender role conditioning.
So, gender role conditioning is really where, you know, kids are kind of, let's call it, pre-programmed to believe that they should play with certain kinds of toys or pursue certain kinds of careers or behave in certain kinds of ways. And, the gender programming leads to, preconceived notions about what we should or shouldn't do.
Okay.
And, this is actually really important in tech. We talked before about tech being dominated by men, and there are reasons that tech is dominated by men. And I think that, back to the gender programming, we have to get girls more involved in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math earlier.
Yeah.
And if we don't, then we will never solve the problem of women in tech, because not enough women select into tech. And so, there's lots of initiatives around this. Dell, schools, organizations everywhere are trying to solve this problem, but it's very real. You see girls who are, like, my daughter's brilliant in math and also in science, and literally has no interest in having a career in either of those. My two nieces the same way. They're all really good at math. I wish I had been as confident in my math skills at their age. They're so good at it, but they're like, no, not interested. And so we have to figure out how to change that. And even my daughter, and my daughter, she's, her mom and dad work in tech, and my brother-in-law works in tech too. So these kids are around tech all the time. And these girls are still like, not for me.
You have a passion for mentorship. Tell us about a moment with a mentee in your career that stands out to you.
Yeah. I think kind of a lot, actually. But I actually just had one a couple weeks ago. That I thought that when I thought that I would share with you, because it was really compelling to me. The job I have, like I said before, I'm the only one who has this job at Dell, which is awesome. It's a huge responsibility, but it's also like, hey, I'm the only one, and that in and of itself is a really weird dynamic, Yeah. And so, part of me thinks sometimes it's a little bit lonely to be the only one. There's no one, like, there's other people that are D&I and other different kinds of jobs, but like, who do I relate to when I complain about my job or, share my successes? And this mentee, she said to me, you are so lucky that you have this job and you're the only one. And I was like, really? And she said, yeah. She's like, how amazing for you to have this job where you can, break ground and do new things and try new things. And, you have such support from leadership to do this. And it was really like for me, it was one of those reverse mentoring moments, which is kind of what made it so impactful. Like, I'm there to help her and to help her grow in her career, which, I think we're making some good progress for her. But she said something to me that made me think, oh, forget it. Who cares if I'm lonely sometimes in this job, like, I'm the only one. It's really cool. And so, that to me is one of my favorite parts about mentoring, is that mentoring is, it benefits both people in the relationship, right? Like, I know talking to her, there were things that I've said to her along the way. Like, I've helped her shift her thinking about how she approaches a problem, or helped her, like, just really, talk through things that she was trying to navigate with her manager, her org, right? And I know that I helped her along the way, but she didn't mean to help me. And, just in the course of conversation, it just flipped everything around, and all of a sudden she became my mentor. And that is like a really, to me, it was meaningful.
Yeah,
cool.
That's great to learn from those that we are educating.
Yeah.
Who are your mentors currently?
Yeah, it's a good question. My boss, although I report to her, is undoubtedly my mentor, or probably my strongest mentor. And it's interesting with her too, because we talk about mentorship. Mentorship is a relationship where you said, there's teaching involved, right? There's also sponsorship, where someone says, puts their name on you and says, hey, I want to help this person move forward. And then there's advocacy, which is where someone speaks up for you, when you're not in the room, right? And these things are all really important.
Yeah.
And they have different pieces in the equation. But I find that my boss is both a mentor for me as well as an advocate for me. And I do believe that when she has the opportunity to sponsor me for, the next opportunity or whatever, that she will. But I worked for her actually for a while, and I wouldn't have said she was my mentor up until probably I moved into this role, because she's a marketing senior vice president. And now I have this role, which is not marketing, not sales. It's all about women, supporting women and women's development, right? So she has shifted into that mentor role for me. It's something that she's also really passionate about. And so she, instead of acting like, my boss where she directs my work or whatever, or, she's kind of that kind of sounding board, she's more of, hey, Leasa, when you're trying to get support for this program, go about it this way, right? Go talk to this executive, much more that mentor relationship. So she's a huge influence in me and how I develop this role. I will be much more successful on behalf of all of the women who I advocate for because of her mentorship of me and how I approach the role and achieving the different things that we need to achieve on behalf of women.
Love that. Who mentored you when you were in the MAYS MBA program?
I think in that time I had a whole circle of support, I would call support mentors. Because as I mentioned before, I was working full-time at Dell. And I actually, I graduated in 2006. And so, the flexible work arrangements that we have today were not really the thing that we had back then. So, I had to have, I actually made special arrangements to only work Monday through Thursday and to be able to go to class on Friday and Saturday. And so, I had my boss being a mentor helping me navigate getting my full-time job done and still managing to get my schoolwork done. I had a colleague who mentored me in how to, really be more efficient in my job. I took a new job at the same time as I started the program, and she really mentored me in how to be more efficient in the job, so that I could actually, get the functional work done in 4 days a week and still manage to get my schoolwork done. I had friends who helped with my daughter and, mentored me, and I would say being a parent and, really making sure that I could be focused on her at the time as well. So, they say it takes a village to raise children, but I actually think that statement is true in a lot of cases. And, throughout our careers, we have times that are more demanding. And even though my job was a little less demanding at the time, I took a job that was not as challenging as the other jobs I had because I knew I was going to be focused on the program. It was challenging because it was new and I had a lot to learn. And I also had, the MBA program. I also had a small child at the time. And so that village of mentors really helped me along the way and helped me succeed in the MBA program.
Great. What is the most difficult leadership lesson you've learned in your career so far?
Yeah, I would say it's really the value of feedback. And we talked about the feedback that I got that motivated me to go to the MBA program.
Yeah.
That feedback was really brutal. And whether she was right or wrong, the way that she approached the feedback was, although it motivated me to do what I needed to do, it probably was less than constructive because it was brand new feedback. It was something I had never heard. She hadn't been telling me for a month along the way, hey, you need to work on this, you need to work on this. It was like, annual performance review time. And she's like, you don't have what it takes. That's not really effective feedback, right? And I think as a leader, whether it's people who report to you or colleagues that you work with every day, or, my volunteer army of people who help with all of the initiatives we have around supporting women here at Dell, if you're not giving consistent feedback to people about how they can improve, then they can never really get better and they can never really deliver the results that they want to deliver. I always think feedback is really it's like the gift that keeps on giving, right? when you give me feedback, when you tell me how I can be better, and I can internalize that and listen, then I become better and I grow in my career. It's not the same as mentoring, right? Mentoring is mentoring involves feedback, but so much more. Feedback is really, specific. And I will say, as a younger manager, I didn't know how to do that very well. And I look back on people who worked for me that I didn't do them any favors because I didn't give them the feedback they needed. And I even remember a couple of times people asking me for feedback, and I didn't really know how to give it effectively. And I thought I wasn't being nice. And I've since learned that we should be kind, and even very direct feedback can be kind, but it doesn't have to be nice, right? They're two different things in my mind. And not giving good feedback and not helping people understand their opportunities is not nice, and it's not helpful. And so I think it was a really important lesson to learn along the way, and to learn how to get better at it.
Yes. I think business culture has made a ton of progress in the art of giving effective feedback, because kind of like what you said in the 80s or something, and especially back in the 50s, I mean, feedback would have, people would have just, hey, fix this or you fired, that kind of thing. And like yelling, yelling at the office, that kind of thing. You just don't. I mean, I'm sure there are companies where that still happens, but that is not mainstream business culture now.
Yeah.
And the giving feedback in a positive way, giving it in a way that it directs an action instead of just saying you're not good at X. That doesn't help anybody.
No, it doesn't.
And so. Yeah, I think we've gotten a lot better than that, and that's something that I'm very grateful for. I got some in my own MBA program. I got some constructive feedback at one, at several different points, and it was always done in such a way. Like, I have to be careful about how early I individualize. You talked about individualizing with your kids, and I do that a lot in the workplace, and I think that's a good thing, but I have to be careful about doing it too early, because then people feel like I'm not being fair. It's kind of the same thing you talked about.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right. What is the most counterintuitive or surprising advice you would have for a business person? Pick any stage.
When I was first out of college, my undergrad, I was a hospitality major. And so I was not always in tech. I started in hospitality, and I went to work very early for Marriott. And Marriott, I still think they're a wonderful company. Bill Marriott was always very vocal in the company about when you treat your employees well, your business will thrive, right? Happy employees equals happy customers equals a thriving business.
Yeah.
And, I think to your point, we've made a lot of progress in business. And I think that we appreciate people much more perhaps than culturally business did 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. But I still think that sometimes we forget how important people are in the equation. And I do believe that when the company, the culture, the leaders, when everybody places that same emphasis on people, you see that that the business will grow and thrive. Your business results can surprise you, because your people are happy and advocating for you as a company and do the things you want to do, or accomplish the goals that the company needs to accomplish. It's interesting. We have a relatively new sales leader in our company, and I have not heard a lot of people along the way, kind of espouse this philosophy that I always heard from Bill Marriott, which is take care of your people, they will take care of your customers, that will take care of your business. This leader says the same thing, and it's kind of become a signature phrase. And I personally am loving hearing him say it, because it's just like, he's, the president of our largest sales organization in the company, and he has that same belief. And I see that not all leaders have that same belief, in different companies, the people I know in Dell, people I know in other companies, but I love hearing it from the top, because I know it will filter down into our organization. And I don't think it matters where you are in your career. If you treat people well, you will reap the rewards and the benefits.
Excellent. Let's move to rapid fire.
Okay.
What important truth do very few people agree with you on?
I think with COVID-19, we live in a time with there's a lot of pessimism out there, right?
Yeah.
And people are, if you watch the news, it's all, more cases and more deaths and more hospitalizations. Oh my gosh, we're all going to be stuck in our house for the rest of our lives and things like that. But I truly believe in the innovation of humans. And I believe that human innovativeness is ultimately what's going to reverse the course of what's happening with COVID-19 and the impacts on society. Be it a vaccine, be it us thinking of new ways to educate our children, new ways to interact with each other. Humans are innovative, and we will figure out how to make change and arrive at at a society, at an economy, at an educational system, a social system, again, that in which we can thrive no matter what happens with COVID-19. We will win because humans are innovative, even if it changes our way of life.
Love that. What is your fondest memory of TAMU?
I loved, honestly, we go back to Imposter Syndrome. Like, I sat in that class, and half the time I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? All of these people are so much more experienced than I am. They have so much more knowledge. But I loved every minute of soaking up the knowledge that my classmates shared. They just had the debates and the conversations and the experience they shared, and professors diving right in these conversations. I mean, I just felt like a slightly intimidated, but a sponge the whole time. Just being in kind of the realm of hearing people with so much more experience than I had talk about it and share about it and debate with the professors and really test their ideas.
Love it. We talked mentorship. If you could have anyone as a mentor for one day, who would it be?
There's a female executive who just left Dell. Her name is Karen Quintos, and she retired because she deserved to retire. She has done amazing things for the company, but I'd love to mentor with her for a day. I'd love to really just hear. She really was kind of at the forefront of women in tech and driving the whole work around diversity and inclusion for Dell. And while I've had the opportunity to work with her on a variety of different things, I'd love to just have her sit down with me for a day, share my ideas, go through them all, and really poke holes in them or help me build them up and fortify them. It would be a really phenomenal experience.
What do you think is people's biggest misconception of you as we sit here now?
People who see me out and about in the neighborhood, they see me with my kids, they see me, I'm wearing my workout clothes all the time. I walk my dog every single day. I think I wander around the neighborhood, and even with the neighborhood, book club type situations, things like that. People perceive me in the neighborhood as just another neighborhood mom, and they really have no idea what I do professionally. In fact, I kind of know this is true because a few months ago, I showed up at a training class with my neighbor, and it was for director level above folks at Dell, and he did a double take. He's like, "You're here?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm here." So people in my community don't really know me for kind of all the work I do professionally. It's kind of just like a hidden part of me for that group.
I love that answer because I think that it's and maybe this is what people have mentioned lean in over and over again on this show. And I think the best thing that has done for business and for specifically women in business is to encourage people not to think of it as binary. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And that is something that I think men have always gotten. I mean, have always been told. We've always gotten that message is that it's you have a finite amount of time, but figuring out how to divide that up and optimize it in a way that works best for you is something that's an answer that you can come up with, and that we as a society bless you to come up with, instead of saying you can play in this game or you can play in that game. And I think women are finally feeling free to play in both and to decide where in both they want to live, if that makes sense.
And I think that's really important, right? Like, we have to have both the space and the grace to live where we want to live. And if I want to go, be a dance mom with my daughter and her dance friends and their dance mom friends, like, I can go do that,
And
I
that
want to
doesn't
go
make
out
you
to the
less of
baseball
a
field.
professional either.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So
Yeah, love that. What do you consider your most valuable failure?
applying for and not getting jobs. I think that I have learned so much about myself along the way in that regard. I think of a job that I applied for, gosh, I don't know, let's say 15 years ago that I didn't get within Dell, that I didn't get. And honestly, while it was kind of like a stab in the heart, it really made me stop and think about, like, what is it that I want? Why would I want that job? Is that really a good skill set? A good skill set match for me? Is that where I want to go in my career? Another time I didn't get a job, and I didn't get the job, but I made the right connections. I impressed people enough in the interview that when another similar job came up, I was on the list of candidates. And I think, those failures, like putting yourself out there and not getting the job, is hard, but those have turned into good things for me over time.
We end each session with Good Bull. Anyone you'd like to send Good Bull?
I have two people that I'd like to give Good Bull to. So, in my team of 70 leaders who help me run Women in Action, there are two that I literally cannot make it through any day without. One is our board chief of staff. One is our communications director. So Liz Dyer Buckley and Christina Furtado. Like, these two women, not only do they energize me with their commitment to also helping women, they energize me with their fact that they both have day jobs and still manage to get super involved in helping women. And I really appreciate both their partnership and their friendship. So Good Bull to them.
Good Bull to them, and Good Bull to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks.
For our MasterCast top 3 takeaways, the first thing I wanted to talk about was that person who told Leasa she didn't have what it takes. Ouch.
Yeah.
But I also love that Leasa just was like, yeah, no, thanks. And she went and got an MBA, right? Which gave her what she needed to have what it took to do the job. So a little bit of, I'm going to ignore that and I'm going to use it to motivate me.
Yeah. And I think the way that she reacted before is the way that most people would probably react now, or many people, maybe not most, but we've learned to sort of accept failure as part of the growth process rather than feeling like it's permanent. So hearing you don't have what it takes means the correct interpretation of that was her interpretation at the time, and the sort of prevailing interpretation now, which is you don't have what it takes right now. And sometimes there's nothing that can be done about that, but much more often there is. I mean, I'm never going to play in the Overwatch League, but many of those you don't have what it takes statements can actually be addressed, especially over time. And that's what she chose to do. Good bull to her.
Also, don't tell someone they don't have what it takes. Like, that's not really a productive comment. And then just help them understand what they need to get to where they need to be. And because obviously she remembered it, not fondly. So not helpful. But glad she responded the way that she did.
Right. And you're right. I think fewer managers would be inclined to say something like that in the first place these days. And that's definitely a good thing. But I'm sure it still happens from time to time, especially among, perhaps managers who have been around longer and grew up, cut their business teeth in a culture that sort of thing was still more common.
True. For our second takeaway, I wanted to talk about how there are fewer girls in GT, fewer girls in coding, and how Leasa brought that up in the context of girls oftentimes not being pushed by their parents or encouraged by their parents to go into those areas. And then later in life, not being necessarily being pushed by their bosses or teachers along the way, and how those issues then translate later in life to have an impact on career choices and career progression as well.
Right. I've thought about this a lot in the context of my own daughter. And so maybe I am ending up being guilty of this as well. But the way that I've thought about Brielle is there's a tension there between, if we just say that if Brielle shows an interest in that kind of thing, that we'd be happy to get her involved in it. Well, how much pushing is actually healthy? And what's the balance between not doing enough to help Brielle realize how smart and talented and capable she is, and putting her on the hamster wheel? And this is one of those places I don't have a good answer. I'm trying to figure it out as we go. I'm giving a lot of thought to it. But in terms of knowing kind of this is the right way to do it, I'm not there. Not there.
Yeah, I think what you said is really important. The balance between pushing versus encouraging maybe is key too. But I think that the problem for parents or teachers or bosses with what you said of wait until she shows an interest is that girls may not show an interest in some of these areas where we need more women because there's nothing socially encouraging them. Even if the parent is like, well, if they show an interest, I'll be encouraging. There's nothing else in society encouraging them to go that way. And
Right.
So, for example, there are some great toy companies that provide girls with toys that have typically been boy toys. They make them in pink so that girls might be more encouraged to use them. But toys like Legos, toys that involve building, toys that involve those kinds of skills, coding toys that might not be marketed to girls or girls might not be encouraged to use or their friends might not be using. And so they won't show a natural interest, but introducing them to those things could help to uncover those natural interests.
Yeah, I think that sounds like stuff that is pointed in the right direction.
Yeah, I do think it's hard though. I talk a lot about defying gender norms in a lot of different environments. And yet I do recognize how hard it is because everything is pushing against any effort to try to defy those gender norms and expectations. For our last takeaway, I just want to talk about how her mom defied gender norms and was an FBI agent. And I just thought that was amazingly cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. And of course, I asked the obligatory Silence of the Lambs question, but that was revolutionary stuff.
For sure.
In those days.
And just, I'm sure, shaped so much of what Leasa thinks about women in work too, which I thought was really, really cool. What a cool example her mom set for her.
Yeah. So my lovely wife, Madison, good friend of the show, obviously, the way that she thinks about work, I think has changed a fair bit over time and has kind of jumped around some. And I've done my best to encourage that, evolving as a professional and as a parent and as a spouse and member of the community and as a person, who needs time for themselves as well. Striking that balance and doing your best to do it well is a challenge for everyone. But I think it is especially challenging for women who feel so much more social pressure on other aspects of their lives. So having those conversations, I think for all the husbands out there or the, boyfriends, men who have, close female friends, basically anyone who's close to women of working age and girls who are not yet of working age, have these conversations. Talk about the tough stuff, talk about the balances, engage them in conversation. I've done my best to do that, and I'm sure I haven't been perfect, but I've tried to do a good job, and it's definitely a priority. So,
yeah, I think that's important and a very important start.
Yeah.
Would you like to close us with a quote?
I would love to close us with a quote. I think this is something that we've talked about on the show before, but it's from Dune, and it is the litany against fear, which goes like this: I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. It is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. From the Bene Gesserit.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
An MBA from Texas A&M University can take your career to a whole new level. With full-time and weekend options, Texas A&M suits your schedule. So get a better gig. Visit mba.tamu.edu.
Looking to start a podcast? Trying to tackle questions like, how do I record? How do I edit? How can I get music for my show? What equipment do I need? How do I distribute it? Good news. The podcast architects are here to help. Whether that's from start to finish, fixing the audio quality, helping you get the episodes posted, go to podconsulting.co. Everyone has something worth sharing with the world.